Welcome to Shakti Punch. I'm your host, Pranav. Welcome. On this show, we will go together hand in hand on a cosmic voyage to unravel the mysteries of reality, divinity, liberation. We're going to do it all together from a dharmic Indic perspective. Special shout out to our producer here, Adi.
Hey, what's up?
What's going on? Adi's our man. He's the Wizard of Oz back here. Also, guys, we are just 426,875 years, 194 days, 22 hours, 15 minutes, and 6 seconds left in the Kali Yuga. Okay, we're blowing through this. It's like nothing. Time flies when you're having fun in the age of darkness. Okay, 426,875 years, however many hours. CPT, am I right? Colored person's time? Indian Standard Time, am I right? That's what we're at. That is the true Indian Standard Time, by the way. As how many years are left in the Kali Yuga. We're having a good time. Stick with us, and it'll blow by like nothing. The next era is upon us soon. Kalki should be showing up any minute now. He's on CP time as well. Yeah, knock on wood. Waiting for the man on the white horse to show up, or woman, or they them. We don't know. But just a little bit of time left. Today, a very special episode today. Today, I just came back, about 2 hours ago, Adi? An hour and a half ago?
Hour and a half ago, not even. Adi and I went and saw Shri. Does she go by Shri? Shri Amritanandamayi Ma, also known as Amma, also known as the Hugging Saint. And I want to talk a little bit about Godmen today for the first half before we dive back into the Yoga Vasistha. We're also going to be talking about self-effort, free will, fate, things like that. But I'm going to first talk about our experience taking darshan from Ammaji, the Hugging Saint. So what was interesting about this was that just maybe a week ago, I'd been talking about how I really have never gotten to encounter in person like a true Indic god man, right? Or god woman, or god they, whatever, right? And I forget if I was talking with you about this, Adi, or somebody else. But then like a few hours later, we had talked specifically about Amma, the Hugging Saint. I've been hearing about this woman my entire life. Just the miracle hugs she'd be giving. And then it was just like hours later, or maybe the next day it was, somebody sent me a link saying that Ammaji is going to be in New York at the Javits Center, opening for Charlie XCX. No, I'm kidding. It was just her. She don't open for nobody. She a headliner. Ammaji is a headliner. And I was like, holy shit. This is my chance. I've always wanted to meet this woman. Every time, since I was a little kid, I was like, I want to experience that, right? You've heard so much about the Hugging Saint, right? She hugs you, and it's supposed to be basically a Shakti Pat kind of experience, right? With a Shakti Punch, nice little pun on Shakti Pat. It's supposed to be like that, a conference of psychic power almost, right? But her name is Anandamayi, right? Amritanandamayi. So maybe Adi, you'd coin this term Anandapat, right? Maybe an experience of direct, automatic, bam, powerful, just bliss coming at you. So we decided to go. Adi and I went. We went super early so we could get ahead of the line, right? There's a lot of admin stuff. You got to go, get in line, get a token out of that line. And then you get shepherded into various buckets of phases of the experience. But, we had really good seats. We were like front row almost pretty much. We were pretty much the first people amongst the first like 20, 30 people to get there.
First like 50, I think, 50. Which is pretty high. There was probably like 400, 500 people there easily, right? And it was a vibe. It felt like a Fish concert without the shitty music. People were just out there. They had all kinds of stalls. Like the merch drip was just crazy, dude. The merch was out of control. They had food set up, chai, everything you could want. And then the people there were very interesting to me. And this is something that I always find whenever I go to just kind of non-Indian, but Indic, dharmic, Hindu type spaces, right? And I don't know what your experience has been with this, Adi, but every time I go,
all a good majority of the men of like white dudes who are into Hinduism, this is not a hate, this is just an observation because I love these people. They're among the most ardent devotees, among the most knowledgeable. They've done way more than I could ever do. They've done all the yatras and this and that and the other thing. These motherfuckers, they're always bald, like cue bald, shiny headed bald dudes, middle age, and then their wives or their spouses, they always look like they're hiking. They're like in the middle of hiking. Like the amount of Merrell sneakers I saw at the Javits Center today was out of control. Like these guys, they look like they just walked out of an REI. You know what I mean? Just like middle-aged white couple, loves hiking. I expected they had a bag of granola in their pockets or something with some M&Ms or something, but they're all there for the darshan. They're all there. Super switched on and happy, you know? And then, of course, you have another assortment, right? Like anybody who knows this, there's a whole contingent of just like, Angrezi baddies who love coming. You go to ISKCON. If you go to ISKCON, okay, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, you go to any of their gatherings, the Bhakti Center here in New York, any of these things, Nityananda, this is another big God man. I don't know if you know. This guy is just baddie central, okay? It's just like really attractive women as well. And then on top of that, then you'll have like an Asian contingent, right? It's usually like fanny pack kind of moms who are in there, and they're just like really excited. Some of them will be dressed up in like saris or langas or whatever.
We had that one Asian lady dancing during the Bhajans. She was awesome.
She was like the Flavor Flav. She was Amma's Flavor Flav, dude. She really was. Because while the Bhajans and stuff are going on, she's just going up and down the aisles, just giving it, you know, totally ecstatic. Totally ecstatic. I love this woman. Who else were there? Who were the other kind of genres of people we would see there?
Well, you had some like, classic kind of devotees from India, your aunties and white.
Yeah, you just saw your standard Indian mustachioed Indian uncles there. You know what I mean? Cul-de-sac, not full bald. They're not as enlightened as the Gordas, I guess, who went full bald, right? Who weren't full cue ball, but just the cul-de-sac uncles with the mustache, and they're just in there, and the wives are in there. There's every age you can imagine, right?
Yeah, that was one thing that was stand out for me was how diverse the children were. It was actually, there were more like kids, like white kids.
Tons of white kids, tons of black kids, tons of Asian kids. I saw more white, black, and Asian kids than I saw Indian kids there, actually. And the thing about these kinds of gatherings, these kinds of, I don't know what you call them. They're not exactly satsangs because they're not exactly, but I guess they're like little melas, little festivals that are happening is everybody's just having a good time. Everybody's just having a great time. And I had a great time there. Adi and I went super early to get in line, get the token. We were right there within hugging distance of Amma. And what was the programming? The programming was like a little bit of a discourse, right? And the discourse from, and I think most of the so-called Hindu God people, God folk, is that it's very Advaita centered, right? And Advaita very much is the kind of underpinning philosophy behind so much Hindu thought, you know what I mean? Like we're going to get
modern day 90% of Hindu thought.
I would say so, right? And even when you go back, right, to antiquity, all Advaita is derived from the Upanishads, from the Vedas, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit as we get into the Yoga Vasistha. So she gave a discourse, and it was really just all about kind of Advaita concepts of oneness, being part of the divine, being a token of the divine yourself, and uncovering the divine within yourself, and this is sort of your life's purpose. And of course, like all Hindu texts, it was just like nonstop stories. You know what I mean? It was like, and then there was a baggage handler, and she didn't speak English. She was doing all this in what, Malayalam. And then there were translations. There was French, Spanish, English translations. And then there was a baggage handler who was like, the bag is separate from me. And no, it is not. You and the bag are the same, this kind of thing, It is the same weight on the caboose of the train, that kind of vibe, and then it's like, and then she's like going into another story. And you're like, oh, what's this story going to be about? It's like, nope, it's just, again, another story, another metaphor of how we are all little nuggets of the divine, finding our way back to the ultimate creator, source, Parabrahman, whatever you want to call it, right? And it was a very charming experience. And then that was followed by about 8 to 10 bhajans, I think.
No, first there was the meditation.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, dude. Then she took us into some tapas, basically, right? And I thought the meditation was great.
My favorite part.
Easily my favorite part, and it hit. Like as an almost lifelong meditator, I have to say the meditation really did hit, guys. It really did. I all the things that you get out of a great meditation, I got compression of time. Coming out of it, a benign dissociated sort of feeling, a feeling of abstractedness, which is really what I'm always after. That's the juice I'm always after, right? Because just on a purely psychological level, the great thing about meditation is that it really abstracts you from your feelings and your thoughts, right? They don't control you as much. You're able to observe them. You become an observer of yourself. On a purely secular sort of level, this is the goal of meditation, I feel. And it really hit. And she took us through several different kinds of meditations too, right? It was like, one of them is like, let's meditate for world peace, that was a big one for her. Let's meditate on, it was a sort of a little yoga nidra kind of thing where it was like, let's experience all the molecules, all the cells in our body at once. Stuff like that. And they didn't ever break up my concentration of meditation. It started off with a very simple, just follow your breath, very standard, almost Western style, or Buddhist style meditation in that sense. You're just kind of following your breath. And then it was very imagistic based, right? It was things like world peace. You're imagining flowers raining down, things like that. No matter what it was that I went through, I don't remember exactly every single one of them. That's why I'm having to ask Adi, because that's how well it hit for me, actually. Because I went in, and again, there was just that compression of time. And to me, that's always the first sign that I've had a really good meditation, is that the time goes by like nothing. Like when I go back to I used to meditate as a kid all the time based on nobody's instruction, but reading books and seeing things from the old darshan Mahabharata or whatever, you know what I mean? That was my whole inspo when I was 7 or 8 years old. I was like, I want to go up into the mountains. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to end up with a bow and arrow and just watch out, motherfuckers. Okay. Your boy coming in hot.
Arjuna, watch out.
Arjuna. I was just like Dronacharya. He was like my idol. You know what I mean? I was like, this is the guy, right? You do penance and then you're rewarded with being a badass warrior, essentially,
I love how they meditated their ways into being extremely armed.
I know. But you know what? If you get into Advaita thought, right, you start to realize that thought itself is matter, right? And it's a really central and very interesting concept, which we will discuss later. And so it kind of makes sense, right? I think you and I have talked about, and I've talked about this with other friends of mine, of well, how did the rishis know? How did they have all this knowledge of things like mathematics, certain things of pranayama, breath work, and stuff like that? How did they discover? How do they know that the nostrils reset? Each nostril alternates and resets every 70 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever it is. And sure, there's a part of that is just, hey, these guys got some time on their hands and they're just sitting there waiting, and maybe they noticed very anecdotally, wow, this nostril's open now and this nostril, stuff like that. But then, when you talk about, certain things in terms of, I don't want to call it numerology because that's a very separate kind of thing, and I don't know enough about numerology, but concepts like around 108, right? And how they then determine that, this is actually the circumference, this is how many Earths are between us and the sun. I forget exactly what the details are. Don't skewer me. Just gently DM me.
We'll put the correction right below Pranav.
We'll put the correction right below me. Bing. Remember, guys, I'm not here to teach anyone. I'm here learning. We're all learning together. That's the point of this. Nobody's go to,
Shishya Nation.
Yeah, it's Shishya Nation. Exactly. Shishya Nation. Exactly. Good alternate name for the pod, by the way. I mean, listen, this is satsang vibes here. We're all hanging. We're all trying to learn something. But I feel like there is something when you consider the concept that all knowledge is stuff that comes from within us inherently, experientially. The experience of being able to do intense meditation and the ability to gain thoughts from it. As an adult, my earliest meditations, I'd taken a gap from meditation then, you hit puberty and stuff and you live in the West, everything goes haywire. But, as an adult, I came back to meditation again. My earliest meditations always had that time compression, right? I would be like, okay, I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. And then I would come out of the meditation and I would look down and it had been maybe an hour and a half, and it's not sleep. It was just I just remember experiencing that kind of compression of time and just feeling amazing. And then I would also come out with really profound insights as well. Just certain ideas around selfhood, the soul, things like that would occur to me. And I'm not saying I'm some enlightened being. Believe me, I am not. I am dharmic, but I am not necessarily sattvic, guys. Okay, we should all be knowing this. Okay, your boy out here, I'm a bit of a rascal sometimes. That sounds douchey the way I said that. However, but I got that experience from this meditation, right? And I think group meditations are very powerful, by the way. Every group meditation I've ever done, there's an energy, a collective energy that's being created that's really, really nice.
A collective commitment, if you will, to the meditation, which is there's some sort of solidarity going down.
I think there is. The collective consciousness itself is starting to yoke to one another. We're starting to meld a little bit, and it takes you to that place. And I really did experience that with Amma's group meditation. And then after that, we had some bhajans.
Senor Ganesh.
So yeah, dude, that was my favorite part. Was for all the bhajans, there's multiple screens that are having it with an English translation, and then there's a French translation and Spanish translation. Then I would look over during some of the bhajans and see the translations into Spanish, and you would see phrases like Senor Ganesh, or, Senor Ganesh in French, I guess. And I was cracking up, and Adi and I would look at those occasionally and just kind of die laughing a little bit. Like, orale, Senor Ganesh is here. What up, Holmes? That's like a East Los Angeles kind of rendition of Spanish, of course.
El Ganesh.
I know. I mean, you got the Cholo Empire, not the Cholas. You got the Cholo Empire. Orale, I'm experiencing oneness over here, Holmes. Get with it, vato. Get down with our satsang, Holmes. If you ain't down with Vatos Locos satsang, you're nobody, essay. So I loved seeing the translations there, and like, what am I? I'm primarily an English speaker. My Hindi is pretty janky at this point. They didn't have any Hindi translations up there, but I liked it because they were coming in multiple languages too. They were singing in Malayalam.
4 languages. There was Hindi, Malayalam, Tamil, and Telugu.
Right?
And yes, I'm biased, but Telugu wins for best bhajan.
The Telugu bhajan was the best one, because that was the best thing about the songs, were that this Telugu bhajan was about, like, it was just like laugh at everything.
Yes.
And in the chorus was just laughing. What was? Do you remember? It was Amma
Navamandi. Ha 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 ha! Amma Navamandi. Ho 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 ho!
And I got into it. I would genuinely start laughing.
Translation is Amma tells you to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But also in a very, like, Indian Mahabharata sort of laugh.
You're really laughing with your chest there. And that's what I loved about a lot of the songs. A lot of the bhajans were really just about, like, hey, smile, be happy. It was really about that. It wasn't, because what reminds me of this sort of God man or God they them experience of going, is what it reminded me of is there's an element of, like, Christian revivalism there, right? That's not where it's necessarily derived from or anything, but it reminded me of, like, Christian revivalist churches, you know what I mean? Because you look behind you and you see a bunch of white people were standing up and they're like, oh, they're doing all the white mudras, basically. They're, like, going like this, and they're like, and Ammaji herself, she had her own move. She was like, that was her kind of.
That was iconic.
That was pretty iconic, dude. She's an iconic woman, Yeah. She's like the Malayalam Aretha Franklin or something.
And she would do that, and she would laugh. Remember?
And she would laugh in the middle of the song.
It was almost a giggle.
It was like a giggle. I couldn't tell if that was pre-recorded or not, though.
No, it wasn't. I think they have a double mic thing. So I think there might be 2 separate kind of effect feeds.
Yes.
And the top mic might have been like a reverb mic.
Yeah.
Which was catching her
little
giggle. But it was cool, man. It was well thought out.
It was very well thought out. And I thought the bhajans were great. And then we had our little tokens. They give you a token to go get a hug from Ammaji. And then Adi and I got shepherded to a separate area. And we went up there, and dude, you would have thought it was like Taylor Swift or something. The way it was just deep. The people around her were just like, there was like a kind of phalanx of people sort of are surrounding her, so nobody could come in and try and, hey girl, let me get a hug, steal a hug from her, you know what I mean, creepy style. And there were very specific instructions about receiving a hug. Like, you're not hugging her, you're allowing her to embrace you. And then after the hug, she gives you a Hershey's kiss and a flower, a rose petal, which is really charming. And I thought it was great. I went up, I had the hug. And I think for me, a lot of experiences like this don't immediately hit me. It takes a little bit of time to percolate within me. So I'm not going to say one way or another that it did something or it didn't do something. I think these kinds of experiences are highly subjective as well, right? It depends on who you are and where you're at in your own journey of things. And I think a lot of things are very karmically derived, you know what I mean, in terms of what your subjective experience is going to be. Not every guru is for everybody, right?
And maybe not every guru is meant for every single moment.
Right.
Like, not that, today I thought Amma was very powerful, but there was obviously the guy right before you. He gave Amma a hug and he was like weeping in the corner of the stage, right? So obviously there was something happening for him that was extremely powerful for him.
Yeah.
Right place, right time for him.
He got the Shakti punch.
He
got Shakti walloped. And I thought that itself was a very beautiful experience, because all she did was she would just come up to you and she would hug you and she would just kind of whisper sweet things to you. And then she gave me a kiss on my temple, and then off I went with my chocolate and my rose petal. And I thought it was a very beautiful thing, and the thing is, it was overall just a very beautiful experience, because it's really just about extreme positivity. You know what I mean? There's not her telling you, instructing you that you have to do this, that, and the other thing. It was really just about, positivity, experiencing positivity, what your general disposition should be moving through the world, and what the reality actually is of you, of me, of all of us. We're all individually divine beings, right? And I think that's a really special thing about it. Adi, do you have any other feelings or thoughts about the Ammaji experience?
I think I was a little nervous heading into the hug.
You were, yeah.
I was like, man, it was a little bit, I don't know. I didn't know, but what I found actually kind of comforting about her is that she didn't, look, I have had experiences with different godmen in my life, meeting them and stuff. And sometimes what hasn't really played out well for me is like when there's a holier than thou sort of air about the person. It's actually extremely human, and it takes me away from maybe what they might have to impart for me personally. But what I liked about Amma was that she didn't really have any pretension about her in that moment. She really was there to share this love with you, which is also very aligned with the message that we heard throughout the day, right? Which is, it's very much peace and love.
Yes.
In an Advaita package, an envelope for you. But I really appreciated that about her. I kind of like how human the hug was, and then she gives you a Hershey's Kisses. I mean, it's almost familiar.
Yeah, it was. It was like being with a grandmother or something.
Absolutely. But it was still powerful.
It was very powerful, I thought. Yeah. It was. And again, I think for me that experience is going to percolate a little bit more, and something's going to happen. Like tomorrow morning, I'm going to wake up feeling some kind of a way about this. But I think it's important because the so-called Godmen of India and of just Indic culture in general have become a very prominent phenomenon, I think, especially in modernity, right? Because you've always had rishis, gurus, pandits, pujaris, whatever it is, right? But these people are all serving very specific functions, right? Pandits, pujaris, these are the people who are the masters of ritual. Gurus are there to teach you about the philosophy. Rishis are the people revealing things, right?
Well said.
And I think what you get from the Godmen is they're giving you an experience. They're there to give you an experience of the divine, right? We talked last time a little bit about how you can intellectually behold concepts and what this ism is all about, but you'll never truly know it until you've actually experienced it. And I think that's what they endeavor to do. They endeavor to give you the experience. And there's a long tradition of these Godmen, going back into the early 20th century, at least. I mean, I'm going to start, of course, and I want to talk about him much more later on in the show as we get on. But, Shirdi Sai Baba. Shirdi Sai Baba, not to be confused with Satya Sai Baba, but Shirdi Sai Baba, right? Shirdi Sai Baba, if anybody's read the Sri Sai Satcharitra or anything like that, you realize that this is really a very similar experience. This guy was just a wandering kind of mendicant who settled down, and people in the village were like, this guy's kind of weird, but this guy's kind of based as well. And then he would just start performing all kinds of crazy experiments and not experiments, crazy feats, to kind of demonstrate his divinity. And also, by the way, he was also a very ecumenical guru as well, right? And there was a lot of confusion. Is he Hindu? Is he Muslim? Is he this or is he that? And he always defied those categorizations. He would say Allah Malik, right? God is Lord, right? But at the same time, he kept a dunni inside of an abandoned mosque, stuff like that. And he was like really one of the first, and he was a giver of great miracles. And the way I would describe him was as somebody who could really perform what Alejandro Jodorowsky, one of my favorite filmmakers, describes as psychomagic. Jodorowsky, of course, went on, stopped making films for a long time. Just beautiful, spiritual, experimental cinema. And he stopped for a while to learn about tarot and to learn about basically all kinds of shamanic healing and stuff like that. And he'd coined this term of psychomagic, which is really using the language of metaphor in a concretized, physical, tactile way to impart divine experiences or shamanic experiences, things like that. And that's when you look at the feats of Sai Baba, a lot of that really plays out all the way from the first miracle and the Sri Sai Satcharitra throughout the book. But we will talk about Sai Baba later. But then you have a lot of godmen just now throughout the 20th century, right? And now the 21st century. And there is a lot of perhaps due skepticism of them, right? Again, we live in the Kali Yuga. We live in the age now of just crude rationality, right? It's the magic is diminished and our rational senses have taken hold as a way of thinking about it, right? I'm not saying it's the concrete or definitive way of categorizing the Kali Yuga or characterizing the Kali Yuga. I'm just saying it's one way of thinking about it. And so you have a lot of due criticism, right? But it all comes from, there's a very Western lens of like, oh, these guys are rich, right? Osho, this is a guy who took a lot of heat for having, how many Rolls Royces did Osho have? Like 90 Rolls Royces?
I want to say 108.
108 would be the magic number. Osho was very unusual, though, in that he didn't attempt to confer any kind of Shaktipat on people. He was really a guy who was a philosopher of sorts. He was a theorist of sorts who really helped to fuse a lot of Western concepts with a lot of Eastern concepts. And he wrote some really brilliant stuff about things like his book on Lord Krishna is incredible, I think, really groundbreaking stuff, really smart guy. And my thought about that is that this is a guy who, okay, he has 100 Rolls Royces, but I'm like, so what? Why shouldn't he have a bunch of Rolls Royces? Who should have, what? Like, just football players? Right? Billionaires who are doing truly exploitative activities and taking money out of people's pockets and using them for their own personal ends. Like, no,
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's some sort of Western conflation with Buddhist ideas of materialism?
I think so.
That people are not able to understand when it comes to maybe more Hindu-driven thought?
Hindu-driven thought, perhaps. But I mean, look, there is obviously a huge strain of mendicancy or renunciation, right, among Hindu gurus as well. You look at Raman Maharshi, right? Totally. He was just, again, look at Shirdi Sai Baba. These are guys who they wore the same thing every day, maybe just a dhoti or whatever in the case of Maharshi. And they were just kind of wandering mendicants, gyanis, true gyanis, right? Self-realized people who were there to expound philosophy to whoever wanted to learn. Right. And helping them understand their true nature of the divine. Osho is not a guy who performed miracles for me. I want my gurus performing miracles. That is big for me. And that's a very interesting current that we see with the godmen of today, right? We have like Sri Ravi Shankar, Sadhguru, and I respect both of these guys. I think they're doing a lot of good for people. They don't perform any miracles, though. What I find with the Sadhgurus and the Sri Ravi Shankars, and again, all respect, they're giving people kriyas and different kinds of meditations that can help. Beautiful. But what I find them to be is they are really gurus of the burgeoning Indian middle class. They speak English, they're technologically savvy, they're upwardly mobile, yet they're still needing some kind of a connection to an ecstatic experience of the divine. And I think that's what these gurus are starting to provide. Amma is very different. Amma is really salt of the earth. That's kind of her her whole thing, right?
And she speaks purely in Malayalam.
Right? And so I find you look at Sadhguru, you look at Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, to me, it's like these are the gurus of the burgeoning middle class, upwardly mobile people. And they're giving them things in a language that this upwardly mobile middle class, burgeoning middle class want to hear things in. He's giving it in Western language, you know what I mean? In many ways, ways of talking about things in a very Western sense. Sadhguru himself was, I think, something of an entrepreneur before he got into the game as like a gyani, right? Sri Sri Ravi Shankar I know a little bit less about. I think it's a very interesting difference between Sadhguru's, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and an experience like Amma, right? Now, there are a lot of criticisms of these god folk. The Caravan just dropped a piece actually about Ammaji, which is very timely. The Caravan, of course, has a very Western-oriented lens on India, though, right? And I'm not faulting that. Maybe that just has its place. And India needs to have that a little bit, right? We should never just accept things blindly. We need to, of course, have some sort of skepticism. But, the criticisms aren't really ringing true. And they're all really well-worn, kind of old hat accusations, right? It's like these people have a ton of wealth and, who's the shady guy? His disciple, her main disciple, the guy who looks like Al Pacino.
Alu Pacino.
Alu Pacino, we called him. I forget his name. His name's like Amrit something, Shivarupa or something like that.
We'll put it in.
Yeah, we'll put it in there. This guy looks like Al Pacino. He's got a great voice too. And so there's a lot of these kinds of accusations, but maybe those things are true, maybe they're not. But one thing that I want to point out is that almost universally, all these godmen are really doing a lot of good in their communities. They're building children's hospitals everywhere. They're doing environmental work, reforestation, animal protection, feeding the poor, toilet programs, things like that. And I think there is something to be said about that. Like there is a very distinct social function there. It's not like a Western evangelist preacher who's just like racking up donations and then buying himself a private jet and then getting with mad hoes. You know what I mean? That's really not what it's about. These people are setting up pretty legit foundations and they're doing pretty legit community work as well. And I think that's something that whether they're people who are giving that direct Shaktipat kind of experience or not, almost all of them are doing this. And I think, you can't help, it's very difficult to look at that and be and still maintain something that's a very crude, skeptical lens of these people. And I'm not saying that these people are for everybody. I'm not saying that they're even for me. What I really just want to recognize though, is that there is a very distinct social function that is there and that is very much tied to the culture and traditions of the land of Bharat. And that they should be recognized and that they do deserve a certain amount of respect. Any final thoughts on the God folk, Adi?
Personally, I might even be more on the skeptical side, but I think that is all
you are definitely you are.
But I think that plays into again being dharmic, and that we come from a beautiful land where anything is possible and everything is possible. So I give credence to the skeptics, but at the same time, I think the key word here is experiential.
Yeah.
Like I think to be skeptical of things and to not experience them is to drive yourself further away from even achieving some sort of skeptical truth.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to be at. That's the stage I would say I'm personally at right now, which is that I am not battling my skepticism, but engaging my skepticism by going and trying to be more involved in experiencing things. And actually, I grew up singing bhajans and today I found a lot of peace meditating, singing bhajans, learning the bhajans as they went on. I mean, there's some root foundational kind of stuff there for me. So that's kind of my big takeaway from today is that
singing bhajans is a based switched on experience, dude. And that's really like, you really feel something much bigger. That's overwhelmingly just the last week I went to the temple. They have like a weekly chanting of Hanuman Chalisa, and I'd never chanted it in a group before. I'd always chanted it by myself ever since I was a little kid. And I was chanting it in this group, and within our first go around of it, I started to cry a little bit. I was like, whoa, I didn't know what was happening. I can't attribute it to happiness, sadness, anything like that. It was just extremely overwhelming and emotional. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. I love the fact that song is something that is so intrinsically baked into all of our rituals and how we practice dharma, and how we practice our religion is a really beautiful thing as well.
I think when I lose sight of God, I often find God in music. You know what I mean? Music is the entry point to spirituality many times when you're lost.
Melody, harmony, rhythm, meter, all those things are those are things that are governing factors of reality as we know it, and it makes total sense that you should be singing. Music is a good thing. What kind of music, of course, is, always questionable. Everything that you're consuming are things that do shape you as a person, and you should always keep that in mind. I'm not saying you should be listening to Bhajans or whatever.
Shout out Ramstein.
Exactly. But one thing I love though is there's a new trend lately of I've been seeing lo-fi hip hop Bhajans coming out. Oh, dude! There's some bops for the Hanuman Chalis. I was like, Shri Guru Charan Zero Jara. I'm just like, whoa. Tulsidas had bars. You know what I mean? Tulsidas was the Kendrick of his time. Yeah, and then it starts getting me to think about what would other rappers sound like chanting like Eminem. Shri Guru Charan Zero Jara. Nishimana Mukuru Sudha.
Kendrick's next album leaves the gospel behind.
It is a beautiful experience. Music is one of the ways I think that God does speak to us, that the divine does communicate to us. It's been with us from just caveman times, since prehistoric times. Everything is rhythm in this life. Never ignore that. Everything is rhythm, up and down, breathing in and out, night and day. It's all there. It's all about bridging the gap of dualities, and that's where rhythm really, I think, finds its importance. So yeah. Check out some of the God folk. This was a free experience, by the way. We didn't have to pay anything to do this. It's just a totally free, open to the public thing.
We had to pay for the chai at the end.
We did pay $4 for some chai at the end.
Fair enough.
It was fair. It was good chai. I did buy some merch, which, got some gifts. And it was overall a pretty positive experience. So check it out for yourself. If you have some disagreements about this, DM us. By the way, we have a Shakti Punch Instagram as well, at Shakti Punch, SHAKTIPUNCH. Follow us there, DM us there if you have any questions, or you can DM me at Pranav, or you can DM Adi at Adi Parige as well. Get with the Godmen. Let's see what you think. Today we are continuing on by discussing the Yoga Vasistha, or in this case, Vasistha's Yoga. The translation, once again, is by Swami Venkatesananda. Last week, we talked about the depression of Lord Rama and the dharmic conception of depression. We're moving along now. We're talking about, how does one liberate oneself from this state? And Vasistha starts getting into the concept of free will versus fate. Very interesting subject. But first of all, before we get into this, he starts this section. He comes in real hot. Vasistha comes in real hot and just casually drops that, hey, by the way, we live in a multiverse. Just casually drops that, Casually drops that. And he drops it because, he starts with a story of Ved Vyas, who is, of course, one of the preeminent of the rishis, right? This is the compiler of the Vedas, author of the Mahabharata, et cetera, et cetera. And this, if you don't know, if you know, you know. If you don't know, now you know. Ved Vyas is obviously the man. And in this story of him, it's a story where Ved Vyas is actually less enlightened being than his own son. And Lord Rama is like, hey, wait a minute. How could this be that Ved Vyas isn't the dude? And Vasistha's like, real quick, homie, that's just one Ved Vyas. Reveals to Lord Rama that this is actually the 23rd Ved Vyas that he's talking about, and that each iteration of Ved Vyas is different from the others. And he calls these different timeline streams of creation. He just casually kind of drops this info. And there's a couple gems like this that we're going to get to before we get into the main topic of this. Here's what he actually says about it. It says, "O Rama, countless have been the universes that have come into being, and that these have been dissolved. In fact, even the countless universes that exist at this moment are impossible to conceive of, and they can be realized in one's own heart. For these universes are the creation of desires that arise in the heart like castles built in air. Talking about the illusory nature of what we perceive as reality, but which is not reality because it's always changing. Remember, reality is that which is never changing. The other thing which I just love that he drops in here, just casually drops the fact that all deities, as we know it, all divine creatures, they're actually just sort of vibrational ripples, almost like belches of the supreme consciousness. Just casually drops this in there, which again really shows you, differentiates for you what the Hindu conception is of divinity versus other perhaps Abrahamic conceptions of divinity. Very different. I'm going to read you a passage from that, which I thought was fascinating and which really took me aback. Rama, the omnipresent omniscience or the cosmic being, shines eternally in all beings. When a vibration arises in that cosmic being, Lord Vishnu is born. Even as a wave arises when the surface of the ocean is agitated, from that Vishnu, Brahma, the creator, was born, and so forth. And then he goes on to say, the creator saw that all living beings in the universe were subject to disease and death, pain and suffering. In his heart there arose compassion, and he sought to lay down a path that might lead beings away from all of this. And that's when we're getting into what this ism is about, right? I just thought that's fascinating, dude. Just a very fascinating way of conceptualizing what the divine is about. Because one thing that you see in Hinduism is that, look, it started with Vedic deities, right? Indra, Varuna, Surya, Agni, elemental, Rudra deities, right? And the Rudras are a class of beings, right? Celestial beings. And then you just see that these evolve forward, right? Vishnu becomes the foremost of, I think it's the Adityas maybe, right? Lord Shiva arises as the foremost of the Rudras, right? And it doesn't just stop there. We do pay obeisance and worship heartfully all of these divinities, Lord Narayan, Shiva, Brahma to a lesser extent, right? Brahma has, of course, been kind of put to the wayside a little bit in modern Hindu worship. But you don't see this ending here, right? At just a certain period. It's a religion that continues to evolve. The classes of divinities that rise to the fore. Now you'll see there's a great trend in terms of Tantra, right? And different beings of Lord Shiva, for instance. Now a lot of people are worshiping Kal Bhairava, right? Who is another incarnation or another representation of Lord Shiva. I find this fascinating. This is a religion that is consistently evolving. It is a science that people are continuing to unpack their understandings of, unpacking and sort of unfurling other celestial beings that are worthy of devotion, that can bring great benefits to devotees. I think that's fascinating. I think that is fascinating. It doesn't just end in one place, like that's the word and then that's it, right? If you're Hindu, you already know that in what our scriptures are, there's already divided up between Smriti and Shruti. Smriti are just timely laws of men, right? And then there's Shruti, which are revealed things that are timeless, sort of timeless wisdoms, right? And that's the Upanishads, the Vedas, things like that. Perhaps the Yoga Vasistha can be categorized as such as well. And so it's very fascinating to look at a religion as something that's continuing to evolve, as opposed to just saying like, nope, that's it, done and dusted. If you don't, set homosexuals on fire or something, you're going to hell too, right? Like that's what it is. And it's such a thing when I look at like, Christian theologians and stuff like that who are trying to adapt to a more modern time. They're always having to like do yoga, basically, or bending over backwards or doing all these contortments and asanas to try and be like, no, this is still Christianity, but here's how. Doing a lot of mental contortions. And for me, that's kind of an issue that's not as much an issue with Hindus. Now, you'll have specific sampradayas and sects and things like that, and they believe in what they believe in, right? But again, it's a highly pluralistic theology in general, because people who are Vaishnavas, right, who are just Sri Vaishnavas who believe in Vishnu, they don't disavow the concept of Lord Shiva, but for them, Lord Vishnu is the prime deity, right? But even within that, you read the Gita. What does Lord Krishna tell Arjuna? He says, "Hey, listen, no matter who you worship, I'm receiving the energy of that worship, right? That's a very important distinction that really demonstrates what a pluralistic theology Hindu thought actually is and what it presents. It's radically different. We have a radically different conception of divinity, right? We play a totally different sport from the Abrahamic religions in our conception of divinity. We basically define divinity as a kind of all-governing consciousness that exists. Everything is consciousness. Everything is a manifestation of this consciousness, and everything is governed by that consciousness. And within our reality that we are in now, which is not necessarily reality, right? We're living in Maya. We're governed by the laws of karma, right? But you don't have that in other sorts of faiths. In other faiths, it's like, nope, this is the one God, this is his rules, this is his son, this is his messenger, blah, 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 blah. And anything outside of that, pure hellfire. Pure hellfire. You're going to melt for eternity in some hellish, horrible place where Taylor Swift is playing 24/7, presumably. Hitler's her backup dancer. Hitler, Pol Pot, Stalin, all the big baddies of history are just there as backup dancers. But no, we don't really have a conception of the afterlife like that. It's something that is constantly evolving, constantly continuing to unfurl. This is a knowledge. We are imperfect beings trying to behold a perfect knowledge, and that I think is for me the best way of conceptualizing what it means to be a worshipful dharmic person. So after Rishi Vasistha casually drops the multiverse and what the actual conception of divinity is, he gets into talking about free will versus fate. Now, this is how Swami Venkatesananda conceptualizes it in this translation. Hindus, for me, free will was never a concept that I grew up having to think about. For me, free will was something that was always just sort of self-evident. Like, I'm clearly have free will, you know what I mean? Like, I hit puberty, I'm going off doing puberty boy business, nobody's hitting me with a thunderbolt, right? You don't really get concepts like that. Hinduism is really more about just trying to understand what are the laws that govern reality, Again, it is a spiritual science more than anything. It is a civilizational bearing towards the metaphysical. That is what Hinduism actually is, and it's incorporative of all the dharmic faiths. And so... after he gets into it, he's talking about free will. He's talking about free will versus fate. And really, what is real? Is free will real or is fate real? And it's interesting because Rishi Vasistha basically says both. But fate is actually not real. But he does describe fate and what actually is fate. And he has a fate, what I would describe as a constructivist view of fate, right? Which is that everything that has happened from past lives, all your karmas, all your actions from past lives will have a bearing on your present life, right? Maybe if you were born rich, if you were born poor, tall, dumb, short, whatever it is, all these things are perhaps based on what had happened in your previous lives, right? And then there's also a constructivism in terms of what has happened in this life, right? What have your actions been? You're dealing with the consequences, not just from things that have happened in previous lives, but from your own actions in this life, right? Everything has consequences. He says that's actually what people describe as fate, is actually you're dealing with the confines of your previous actions and the consequences of those actions. So I consider that a highly constructivist view of what is fate or what is destiny. But he says that is not reality though, right? That is not what is most important. What is important is what he calls self-effort, or we'll call here free will. And self-effort always trumps over fate every time. So let's say you were born dumb in a previous life. I mean, no disrespect, right? And you come into this life, you have the opportunity through devotion, through perhaps bhakti, if you were wanted to say, right? And this is in terms of how does one achieve moksha and liberation and things like that. You are here to burn off the previous karmas, and those are both good karmas and bad karmas, and that happens through free will, through your own effort. Self-effort always trumps over fate. Fate is nothing in the face of that. It might be a little bit harder depending on what your previous karmas were. It might be a little bit easier. And of course, Sri Krishna talks about this in the Gita as well, right? That a yogi who is not perfected in this lifetime will live another lifetime, and it'll be a little bit easier in the next time because of his karmas in a previous life, right? Of his sattvic behaviors or karmas in a previous life. And so I think this is a really important thing to understand, is that self-effort is everything. It's again, fate. It's just how you're conditioned by previous karmas. That is your conditioning. And this whole ism is about deconditioning your soul. That's what all of this is about, is deconditioning the persona, the personality, the soul, the Atman, from all the unnecessary parts. You are a sculptor beholding yourself, and maybe you're a big lump of clay, or maybe you're one that looks a little bit more like this perfected being that you want to be, but you are a sculptor beholding yourself as a lump of clay, and you are chiseling away through abhyasa, through vairagya, right? Consistent practice, dispassion, at achieving moksha, achieving liberation, and understanding and truly self-realizing yourself as not separate from, but a part of that superconscious being, that superconsciousness that pervades all things. Our latent tendencies that we have in this, right? I'm a sometimes profane guy. I'm a funny guy. I can't help but to joke about things. These are constructed by things that perhaps happened early in my life. Maybe it's also constructed by what happened in this life, growing up. Hey, maybe feeling a little bit alienated or isolated because I'm the only Indian kid in a classroom full of non-Indians, right? I'm not saying that's all it is, right? So that made me a very funny person. But I was always kind of a weirdly funny guy. I was always making my parents laugh. There's something that's going on there. My parents were a little bit funny too. Again, this is constructed through things in this life and previous lives. Very important to remember. But all those things are trumped by self-effort, right? Our latent tendencies, all those things. And it's more or less difficult depending on your karmas. The purpose of all this, we're freeing ourselves. Karma is always not just action, it's action and the consequences of those actions. You gotta remember that. And our lives, this is why we live many lifetimes, right? We're here to get through many lifetimes in order to have that moment of realization. So how does one, what does self-effort consist of? Well, self-effort, according to Vasistha, is of two kinds, right? Your self-effort from your past life and your self-effort in this life. Your self-effort from this life will always be more powerful because you have the will, right? You have the will to power in this life of liberating yourself and overcoming those past karmas. But then he goes on to say that self-effort consists of three things. That's knowledge of scriptures, right? That's one thing. Instructions of the guru, and then willpower, sheer willpower and work. And I think that last one is maybe the most important one to think about. Because maybe we're not always going to have exposure to scriptures. We're not always going to have the luxury of a guru, of a reputable, good guru, right? I know I don't. I'm a total autodidact. I completely, my self-effort was something that was very self-motivated from a very young age as a bad kid. I was a bad Indian kid, hated school, was a troubled kid, but for some reason from a very early age, I was just into this shit, There was just something about it. And so that was there's something karmic there that led me into doing that got me into these things from an early age and had me, through my own self-effort, learning more and more and more, right? And I am probably nowhere near liberation. Who knows? That's not for me to say or determine. I do, however, have abhyasa. I am persistent in my efforts and I will continue to be.
Hopefully you get to keep your thumb, but it kind of reminds me of Ekalavya.
Oh, please go on. Ekalavya. Tell us about Ekalavya, Adi.
So I'm sure many people here will know Ekalavya, but long story short, Ekalavya was very interested in becoming a great archer, but did not have access, due to being a tribal person, did not have access to the great teachers like Dronacharya, who Arjuna and all the Pandavas and Kauravas learned from. So he built himself he manifested Dronacharya's teachings through a statue of Dronacharya.
He made him out of mud.
And it just reminds me, and obviously he, as a shishya, had to pay with his thumb, which, great debatable topic in terms of what that means. But it just, the story of self-effort.
Yes,
reminds
absolutely.
me, and not having access to the guru, but still accessing the guru.
So what, right?
Yeah, because a lot of the gurus that have inspired me in my life, I've read through text.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we're
video,
but if we're gonna be real, Ekalavya was just eavesdropping on the lessons and kind of peeking through as well, But he did worship the guru, right? Like he had extreme reverence. The interesting thing about Ekalavya, I don't know if you know this, but he was actually by birth a cousin of Lord Krishna.
Really?
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time.
Fascinating.
Yeah, he was actually, and he himself was royalty, right? So Ekalavya himself was a prince of whatever you call Adivasi or whatever you would call
Yeah. He was the son of a tribal leader.
Yeah, of a king, of a tribal king. And so he did have access to gurus and things like that, right? Like there was a lot of positive interactions between these tribes and then I guess you would call them more Aryan kings, right? And royalty. You see that throughout the Ramayana. There's great friendships and alliances and things like that.
Of course.
And they're all bound by, this isn't a history podcast, but we can talk about the history of how Hinduism actually came to be Hinduism. And it is a confluence of different peoples coming together. But yes, hopefully I don't have to give up my thumb,
you got good thumbs, bro.
I got good thumbs. I don't want to give them
thumbs.
up. I got to play. I got to play a lot of PlayStation here,
Yeah. Ekalavya is like only playing Wii.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe now he's got the Apple Pro or he's VRing it.
Pro. Yeah.
So how does one achieve moksha, right? How does one find liberation from samsara? And there's a beginning to this that Rishi Vasistha explains to Lord Rama. And this is through four things that go into this, right? This is within the subset, I guess you would call self-effort. And the first of these things is contentment. Being content, being happy with what has been given to you unsought, meaning what is... what you have been, what has been fallen into your lap and who you are, right? There's a certain contentment. And I think that's a tricky term, right? Because it's like, well, isn't self-effort supposed to be about striving beyond what your conditioned soul, right? And overcoming karmas of previous lives? Yes. And I think what he is trying to say to this is about equanimity. Right, is the ability to have equanimity and remain the same, have the same disposition no matter what your circumstance, right? And this really feeds into self-control, which is, of course, the other big one that he's talking about. And this, we're all familiar with this. This is just control of the senses, not being too taken by food and drink, pleasure, entertainment, horniness, whatever it is, being able to have these things on lock so that they can be channeled in a healthy way. By the way, when you do have that self-control, all of those sensuous pleasures of life are actually heightened. You're getting a lot more out of them that way than if you're just grinding away at them. You're really grinding away at your sense of actually your ability to experience pleasure, right? An alcoholic no longer enjoys alcohol because that's all it is. He's actually incapable, right? Now he's just filled with spirits. That's why they call them spirits, right? He is just that at this point. There's no enjoyment there. It's pure maintenance and it's not pleasant, right? The same thing goes for everything. Everything, right? If you look at drugs really there's a continuum of drugs where most drugs, narcotics start as a medicine, then they can become an intoxicant and then they become toxic, right? Purely toxic. So it's very important to think about these things on a continuum. Same thing goes with sex, all of that. So this is why self-control is very important. And so these things are also very important because all these things, all they really do is bind you to material reality more, right? These are karmas now. These are just idle. They're bad calories, basically. You know what I mean? They're useless calories. That's how, if you want to think about it, karmic calories, they're bad karmic calories. They're the junk food, so you should only have them very sparingly. And then, of course, the fourth of these is satsang. What is satsang? Satsang is you're getting together with your peeps, getting together with the boys, the bros, because you're trying to achieve broksha. Okay.
Broksha.
You're trying to treat broksha up in here. That's if you're with the boys, Listen, if it's you and the baddies, ladies who want to get together, hoksha. Sorry, maybe not. I don't know. Again, guys, I'm not sattvic. I am dharmic, however. Okay. Maybe you hear broksha, hoksha, whatever it is, it's all moksha. You know what I mean? And that's when you're getting together with like-minded people of good character, good quality character, and discussing all of these things, discussing what is the true nature of reality, divinity, liberation. That's what I endeavor to be doing with Shakti Punch. I want this to be a satsang. I want us to all be doing this together in a community. And you're learning from each other. You're discoursing. You're having debates. The interesting thing, Hinduism is there's a culture of debate, which is very extreme. I don't know if you've ever heard about this, and I forget where I read this, but Adi Shankaracharya, who is one of the foremost conceptualizers of Advaita, right? He's really like the godfather of modern Advaita as we know it. He would go around debating, right? Debating other scholars of different schools, like dualists, non-dualists, Buddhists, whatever it would be, right? And the debates, though, would have stakes. The stakes would be things like, Oh, you're a duelist? Well, let's make this debate interesting. Would you like to bet your left arm on this? And then Adi Shankaracharya is like, oh yeah, you can bet left arm. How about I bet my head? Too, I'll raise you one head, right? It would be like death. You know what I mean? That would be the debate. It wouldn't just be like marauding, like you're a duelist, we're coming to invade your village and decapitate you. No, it's like you're having a guy who's going, he's like, he believes so much in his own power of rationality, inscape and insight, revelation that's been given to him, that he's willing to go and debate in rational terms with somebody else and put it all on the line. And I forget where I read about this from, but I did read this, that the debates were so intense that there were like real stakes involved there.
I mean, maybe you didn't even read it. You just saw it
Maybe
with
I
a bunch
just
of
saw it.
uncles at a dinner party.
One Punjabi uncle just had too much Shivas and they disagree about something about China or something. And then the next thing you know, somebody's getting mukka marenge, you know. But not really. And all shouts to Punjabis. Who doesn't love whiskey? Sparingly, self-control. And Shiva's regal, you know. Shiva's regal.
Shiva's regal.
Okay.
Kailash is best.
I mean, listen, Lord Shiva was known to be, you know, he's the king of the Agoris, right? I mean, he's
100%.
He was in there. Anyway, satsang. Satsang is very important. Satsang has played a huge value in my own life personally. I started this podcast because of my own satsang with Adi, with another group of dharmically minded friends that I have. You know, I'm on a great group chat with some people. Shouts to my friend, my boy Vikram. Shouts to my boy Harshal. Shouts to my boy Usama. You know, he's not a Hindu, but we have satsang together because we talk and unpack a lot of concepts together about these things. And satsang is very important. I think it's arguably the most important because it's keeping each other honest. You know what I mean? It's keeping each other interested. It's keeping yourself sharp. You know, shouts to Felice, my girlfriend, just an amazing yogini in her own right, who's always constantly teaching me things, and we're always teaching each other. We're always learning from each other. There's no hierarchy in there. There's no pissing contests in there. You know what I mean? But it is really learning.
It's also, I think, a place of application for all that self-effort.
Definitely.
Because what's the point if it's just for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
the satsang is crucial.
Satsang, I think, is so crucial. And the interesting thing that Vasistha says is that any one of these things, contentment, you know, or I'll say equanimity, the fourth one is, of course, self-inquiry. Sorry, I don't want to skip past that. Self-inquiry, this is the biggest part, actually. This is arguably the biggest one. And self-inquiry is really the most important questions of, like, you know, who am I? Who am I actually? Why do we exist in samsara? What is samsara? Why is this all happening? And these things all ladder up into the same thing, which is moksha, right? And of course, these aren't the only things, right? You are going to get into various other things, meditation, things like that I do believe we do discuss later on in Yoga Vasistha. And we are definitely going to be talking about on Shakti Punch, okay? We're big time hardcore meditators out here. But these four things, any one of them alone, according to Vasistha, are as good as all of them together as any other, and will lead you to the gates of moksha. But all four of them together, I mean, you can't get any better than that, right? So you should all endeavor to adhere to and embody all of these things of equanimity, self-inquiry, self-control, satsang. Satsang is just fun too, man. You know, you get together with your boys, like it's a hang. Another interesting thing is that after this section in the Yoga Vasistha, Vasistha says, hey, listen, you get all these things, then you'll be ready to read the Yoga Vasistha. You know, and he like references the book itself, right? Which is, again, gives rise to the fact that this book is for people who are at the intermediate phase of their spiritual development, right? It's going to take you to the next level. And you should have been doing all of these things before in order to get to this level where you can understand or begin to behold these concepts and perhaps get that experience. But Adi, you made a very funny reference when we were talking about this before of how he references the book itself, how it's like watching Spider-Man and then somebody hands Spider-Man a Spider-Man comic book.
Exactly.
Which I think is fascinating. It's hilarious. Sometimes it throws you a little bit, but he then goes on to explain to you what the discourse is going to be for Lord Rama in this, right? Where he's like, we're going to talk about this, then we're talking about this, and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about this, and it's going to be all stories. It's all going to be stories and stories within stories and stories within stories within stories. Which, by the way, which was all the discourses of Amma that we saw today. All of the discourse, it was never just concepts, right? It was always just like, here's a story, the baggage handler, right? The guy.
I think concepts have no value without the story. I know that's a bold statement, but
it is 100%
a concept
true.
is just a concept until it has a face to it.
Exactly. And that's the first level of getting experiential knowledge of it, right? Is bringing it into the realm, into the human realm, right? Metaphor is that thing which always bridges the gap between knowledge and experience. That is why metaphor is so deeply important. And I think we're going to talk about this later in terms of puja, in terms of ritual, and why we're going to see that is metaphor, that is concrete poetry that is taking place, that has real power to it. We will talk about that later. For now, though, I don't know. I feel like this is a good place to stop. I'm getting pretty sweaty. I'm getting worked up. Some tapas is happening. I'm generating some heat in here. Guys, this has been Shakti Punch. If you ever have any questions about anything I've been reading or any insights that you want to contribute, once again, I want to encourage you very sweetly. I want to invite you. This whole podcast, this whole show is an invitation in. Because if you are a Hindu who is just trying to learn about it again in your adult life, this is an invitation back in. I have invited myself back in. We're all inviting ourselves back in to learn about this together. DM me at Pranav, at Shakti Punch, at Adi Parige. Hit us up. We do have a Patreon that's going to be going now too. It's very simple. It's really just to contribute and help support it. It's a very small amount, so $1.08 if you want to support. We would love that too. We'll have the info for that as well here. Thank you so much for coming to Shakti Punch. Hari Om.